What's up, everybody? We're back here. It's been a little while since we've done a live on Chad Daybell, and that's what we're doing tonight. His kids take the stand in his defense. Are they full in on his side? Will they be kind of neutral? How will cross-examination go since they're victims in the case? Does John Pryor have a plan for his defense? And is it centered around the kids? We're going to break all of that down tonight. We're going to answer your questions you have maybe about the indictment almost getting thrown out last week. Whatever you want to ask about, we're going to answer tonight. Thanks for being with me. Let's get into it. So we knew from opening statements on John Pryor's side that the kids must be testifying for Chad, at least one of them. And we heard from not one, but two today, plus the start of a son-in-law. And I wasn't quite sure what to expect. I knew they were going to give us some details, maybe about the house and maybe about Tammy's health, but I wasn't sure if they were going to fully believe and buy into Chad Daybell's defense. That A, number one, Tammy died of natural causes, and B, number two, that Lori Vallow is really behind JJ and Tylee's deaths. So we're going to get a lot of information as we listen to the kids tonight, and then some missteps in Pryor's defense. But I really want you guys to let me know what questions you have and what you thought of the kids' testimony, and if you felt like it was reliable, and if you felt like the defense was maybe poking some holes in the state's argument, especially if we talk about Tammy Daybell, which I think was John Pryor and Chad Daybell's best argument all along. I do feel like the state proved the case beyond a reasonable doubt in their case in chief with all the evidence they presented, but the defense gets one last chance to poke some holes and maybe create some reasonable doubt. So that's going to be the big focus of the witnesses that they call. And I will say, if you find his daughter, Emma Murray, credible, maybe some holes could have been poked. And in Tammy Daybell's charge specifically, we knew, if I was going to guess and bet that one Daybell kid was going to testify, it would have been Emma, based on the squad car video. It seemed like she understood and believed her dad and thought this was all kind of unfair. Right off the jump, John Pryor confirms that the prosecutor subpoenaed her but didn't call her, obviously trying to make it look like they're trying to hide something or they don't want the jury to know this information. And then, of course, he tries to make it seem like I didn't tell you what to say. I just told you to tell the truth, which more on that later. But he almost couldn't help himself, right? There was a comment made about John Pryor's potential financial interest in Chad Daybell's house. And it could have just been forgotten. It wasn't, a huge highlight of the day. I know we talked about it because we know more about than what's just going on in trial in front of this jury. I don't know how much the jury picked up on that, but then the judge gave a curative instruction. Fine. Maybe still it wasn't so obvious, but now it's about as obvious as anything because John Pryor brings it up once again for at least the third time that the jury's hearing it with Emma, trying to prove he's not, I guess, I don't know what he's trying to prove, that he's not a scummy lawyer. Because, people know clients pay their lawyers. They might not always agree with how it happens or if he did take payment for the house. I don't know all the specifics. But to talk about it a third time, I'm not really sure it helped him like he thought it did. But let's take a listen to the exchange.
And where do you live right now?
I live in the house that was my parents'.
Okay. And at this point, you're not aware of any financial situation. Is it true that you're not aware of any financial situation between myself and your father regarding that house?
That's correct.
And you don't.
So, did that prove something? All he proved is that she is not aware. That's all he proved. Welcome to Helen and Leah. I think John's got an interesting members only planned for May later this week. And I think his plan is just to embarrass me. So good luck to all the members watching that this week. I'm sure it'll be fun. Maria said she did not find Emma credible. So I'm interested to hear what you guys think as we continue to listen to her testimony.
You don't have any personal knowledge of anything that is any arrangement between your father and I. Is that correct?
Yeah, I made an arrangement with my father. I don't know what he's decided with you.
Okay. I want to talk a little bit about your mother's health. What can you tell me in general about your mother's health in the last year or so?
Her health started declining. I was really worried about it. She'd always been one to be able to meet the demands of daily life without being exhausted. And she started going to bed at before dinner some nights. It would be 5, 6, 7 o'clock at night. and she would sleep in too if given the opportunity. So suddenly needing to sleep a lot was very confusing to me.
Are you aware of any health issues that your mother may or may not have had?
I, at the time, was not. Since her passing, I've been diagnosed with sleep apnea, and my maternal grandfather also has sleep apnea, and she's the generational link between. So I wonder if she did. That's something that obviously we can't investigate at this time, but symptoms like daytime tiredness and not getting restful sleep seem like they would fit what speculation.
It's the same.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm surprised she was even able to get into that at all. The sleep apnea that she has and maternal grandfather or grandmother with her as a connect. I mean, I think that's speculation. That's reaching. She's not a doctor. There's no connection. She's never been diagnosed with sleep apnea, which Blake gets that out on cross. Absolutely the right lawyer to cross Emma. But I mean, so she's really going to take the stand and say that her mom was having health issues. I mean, I was kind of surprised. I expected her to say, my dad loved my mom. He was sad when she passed. I just can't believe that he's such a good man. I can't believe he had anything to do with that. I honestly believe that's what she was going to say. But to go so hard and really try to help the defense build their defense that Tammy Daybell was sick and probably died of natural causes, that's really how this came across to me. Like, she was really pushing and pressing to help Chad Daybell in his defense.
Were you aware of any other health maladies that your mother may have suffered from?
She had anemia.
Okay. Were you aware of any medications that your mother may have taken?
She preferred herbal supplements. She did take the generic form of the medication Prozac.
Okay.
That was the only prescribed medication that she regularly took.
Were there any non-prescription medications or herbs or supplements that you're aware of?
Oh, definitely. She really liked using colloidal silver was her favorite. It's
Slow down for me. Colloidal silver?
colloidal silver. It's distilled water with particles of silver in it to the part per million.
And now she's going to go through some of the weird stuff that Tammy did, in her opinion, which again goes in line with Chad's defense that she tried to do it without the doctor. Maybe this stuff hurt her, maybe it didn't, but she didn't go to the doctor maybe when she should have, or maybe she would have been better at her age, physically than she was. That's what they're trying to build here. That's really what they're trying to build here. So it felt like it didn't really hit to me, but it definitely was readily apparent that she was trying to help Chad Daybell with her testimony, which I'm not going to condemn her for. If she believes him and it's her dad and she wants to see the best in him, it's hard for me to believe. It's hard for me to see with all the evidence pointing against him that he was involved in all of this. It's really hard, but I'm trying to see it from her perspective. I'm struggling to, but I'm trying to stay there before, because I do think she's a victim in all of this too. Maybe she's a little brainwashed from him, and I don't know. I feel bad for everybody that came into contact with Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow, if I'm being honest.
It tastes like you're drinking water out of a metal water bottle, and it can cure everything.
Okay. And
I say that with a smile because you really should go to the doctor instead of drinking. Else for speculation.
go ahead.
Yep. She would use colloidal
Everybody's
silver.
like, I love colloidal silver. I wasn't talking about that. I think Emma's trying to make it sound like this stuff is weird. The colloidal silver, it tastes disgusting. The cream she puts on her arm, all these things that she did as opposed to going to the doctor. That's all I meant. Speaking of this weird stuff, I'm drinking this tonight, which is called Poppy, which is prebiotic soda. It's good for gut health, my wife tells me. This one tastes really good. So sign me up for the weird supplements. But I think that's the point, is she's trying to bring up this stuff. So many people love colloidal silver. I never heard of that before today. I'll have to ask my wife, see if she knows about it. But the point is, she's really trying to give good evidence for the defense. I think that's what she's trying to do with this testimony.
As an antiviral is what she called it. So anytime she felt under the weather, she would take colloidal silver and she would, this calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
Go ahead.
I witnessed her drinking it and she would encourage other people in our household to do so.
Were you a consumer of colloidal silver?
I was.
Okay. How'd that work for you?
It tastes nasty.
Okay. Did it help you in curing any ailments that you may have had?
I don't know.
Were there other things that your mother did in terms of remedies to resolve other issues she may have had?
She bruised really easily and she used arnica gel.
Okay.
Arnica is a plant that helps with bruising. She had it in gel form.
And when you say she bruised easily, can you elaborate on that?
If she were to bump her hip on the counter when she was walking by, she would get a massive bruise from that. Even things like carrying a heavier load of groceries where the bag pressed on her arm would leave a bruise.
Okay. Okay. I want to go to
So then we talk a little bit about how she struggled loading boxes and walking certain places, clearly trying to develop that her health was deteriorating right before her death, which I would have to believe she believed that. Like, who could testify against their mom if they didn't actually believe that? I'm sure you guys will let me know in the comments if you think otherwise, but I mean, that's just wild to me. Dad was driving the Dakota at the time. A lot of the testimony is coming through with that, as if he couldn't have known, like that day maybe, that Tammy was going to drive the Dakota. And, he told Alex Cox. It's as if and they even all admit, like, we all drive each other's cars and have multiple sets of keys. The Fitbit thing that they talked about, I thought it was one thing I did think was interesting, that if I wanted to be petty and I was on the jury, I'd say, Chad wouldn't take part in the Fitbit challenge and getting healthy. He didn't care about that. Well, he cared about it when he came to Lori Vallow, when he was getting his tan and losing weight and, talking about how their bodies were going to look and stuff like that. Blake, during some of her objections, led me to believe she was going to have some stuff to impeach her with, which, we found out later. This I thought was interesting and worth playing because you guys brought it up a lot. John Pryor, when he's up there, something tells me he's been watching some of the coverage because he commented on the house stuff, and then he also commented on some other comments he's been getting heat from. Tell me if you think this made it any better or if it just made it worse.
Both overweight and wanted to exercise more. And some ladies at the school invited us to come to a class that they were going to it was in the evening at a local elementary school in the gym.
Can you tell me when approximately you and your mother started those classes?
We started going in April 2019.
And this was a joint effort to improve both of your fitness?
That's correct.
In your situation, was that shortly after a birth of one of your children?
That's correct.
And I got a lot of heat for suggesting people's weight and size and everything else, but needless to say, you felt personally.
Yes, that is my own words. I was overweight and I wanted to get healthier.
Okay. And
He's like, I got a lot of heat. It's like, well, it's because of the way you said it. If you would have just said it like this, like each of them individually set fitness goals, and that's why they wanted to start working out more with a Fitbit, etc. There are much better ways to say it than John Pryor said it throughout this trial.
your mother, from discussions with her, shared the same view?
Yes, I don't know how much she weighed. Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Okay. In any event, the purpose of the Zumba class was for both of you to try to improve your fitness.
Yes.
Okay. Can you talk about the level of participation that both of you engaged in as part of those clogging and Zumba classes?
The idea of the Zumba class, High Fitness, is that you can participate to whatever ability you're able to. The way that the gym was set up is it was a school multi-purpose room, so it had a basketball court and a stage. Our instructor would be on the stage where everybody could see her moving, and we would mirror her body movement, similar to how
She
you would.
explains these classes and basically how you can go at your own pace, do it at your own level, and you didn't have to be doing the high intensity if you were signed up for the class. Again, belittling and downplaying any fitness stuff that Tammy was doing. She talked about how she basically cheated on the fitness thing where you would just, shake your hand around or do whatever, and that would make the fitness Fitbit, whatever, count steps, and, really downplaying that she was physically fit at the time of her passing. Salt Life Girl said, daughter hard to listen to, so too, she seemed like she victim shamed and seemed unreliable. She is a dutiful daughter. She had some conflicting testimony. Chris said, Peter not coming in hot this time, LOL. Will you be able to look into the drama with Corey Richens? So let me know if you guys want me to. I had a mediation all day today, so I wasn't able to look into really anything else. Although this morning early, or was it last night? I can't even remember. I did watch an interview you guys sent me that Nate Eaton did with juror number 4 from Lori Vallow's case. So we got kind of a Daybell double header tonight. It's going to this video is going to redirect you right into my reaction to that juror interview, and it was awesome. So if you want to hear that interview and my thoughts on it, stick around after this. If you guys want Corey Richens, let me know. I'll have to take a look at it. I honestly didn't. I haven't looked at it at all yet. Julie, what does an untimely mean during an objection? So it's like, if I ask a question, what color is the sky? And somebody answers blue. And then I'm starting my next question and they're like, objection, speculation. The judge is like, it's already been answered. You missed your opportunity to object. It's already come out in front of the jury. So I'm not going to sustain or overrule it, or I'll just overrule it because it's untimely. Now, well, that's fair and technically okay. A judge can do that because if you're too late on an objection, then sometimes you miss it and you miss the ability to keep the prejudice from coming in. But it's really hard to object that quickly when a lawyer asks a question. So most judges, even after the answer, will rule on the objection and strike the answer if they have to. Judge Boyce, pretty much the whole trial, if you're late on an objection, he's like, too bad. You got to get that in quicker. And therefore overruled because it's untimely. Pebbles asked, are you going to cover Scotty's arraignment? If there's anything to cover, sometimes nothing happens on an arraignment, but if there's anything to cover, yeah, there seems to be enough interest. You guys want to see it. You guys want to hear about it. That's usually what makes me do it. All right. The next interesting part was when they started talking about insurance and how it was presented at their school and the life insurance that we all heard that Chad took out and upped right before Tammy passed. Well, according to Emma, it was all Tammy's decision. Tammy did it. Chad didn't even know. Emma's husband didn't even know. They did it one day at the school together where they worked together.
One of our faculty meetings, they came and talked to us about life insurance and increasing it. And they showed us that the rates were competitive, or it was really cheap insurance. And so they encouraged us to purchase some. And both my mother and I purchased some at that meeting.
Okay. And at the meeting, was it at the meeting that both of you just elected to purchase the insurance?
Yes,
So prior to that, and I can't remember, in September of 2019, I believe you were married at that point. Is that correct?
I was.
Did you consult with your husband before you elected to up your insurance at that point?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Sustained.
Are you aware as to whether or not your mother consulted with the insurance with your father prior to upping her insurance on that meeting day with Taylor Ballard?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Overruled.
Are you aware of whether or not your mother consulted with your father on that day to up her insurance?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
You can answer it.
We were sitting at a table and filled out the paperwork together. We both signed to take out more life insurance on ourselves, and we did not consult with our husbands.
Okay. And at that point,
So, I mean, from that perspective, she's saying Chad Daybell had nothing to do with it. Tammy did it. I did it. Blake impeaches her a little bit with the document. I'm not so sure it was exactly what Lindsay Blake said it was. But I mean, I think this testimony, at least something for the jury to think about if money was really a motive for Chad Daybell. I think it was. I think we've got enough evidence of that. But again, Pryor's going to have a lot to argue in closing because of Emma and because of Garth and because of their witnesses. So he is building a defense. Do you think it holds water? That's a question I have for you guys that are watching the case that are potential jurors or could be jurors in your jurisdiction. What do you think? Daisy, thank you so much for gifting 5 memberships. Kat said, so don't talk over others except when you're objecting, always interrupt. Yeah, it's crazy to think you can object that fast. And then you can't object before the question's done. So it's like in that perfect moment, at the time the question is done and before the answer comes out. And some of these witnesses, like Emma for sure, was trying to force her answers in quickly. So that gets really difficult, really difficult. Lynn said, so did Joe follow Chad to work every day? Pryor turns carrying one box down the hall to carrying boxes all day. He's testifying. He is. And he definitely, it's hard for criminal defense attorneys to flip and be directing witnesses because as you can tell, he's leading. He's still acting like he's cross-examining some witnesses. We'll see if more objections come. And what mom doesn't have her muscled son pick up the heavy stuff? Always, always. The husbands and the sons with all the, the big muscles, we got to help our moms out, right? Is that it? No, we're going to listen to a little bit more here.
did you take up the maximum amount of insurance that you could purchase at that point?
I did not because I could not afford it. I later did.
Okay, at the next period.
Yes.
But it's your understanding that without discussing with your father, your mother elected to up her insurance to the maximum amount.
I saw her check that box on the paper.
I want to change gears a little bit. And there was some testimony about a Google search for south-southwest wind. And that would have been on 9/8 of 19. Do you recall that?
I do.
And was that your father who did that search?
That was me.
And what was the purpose of doing that search?
I saw a
So
rainstorm.
then the whole which way's the wind blowing on this date, that was pretty damning. And, Google searches have been the thing of the present that's really damning for criminal defendants. But now she says that she's the one who did the Google search. Again, this all comes down to credibility. Are they going to believe her or are they not? If they do believe her, hook, line, and sinker, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough.
We were planning an outdoor event and I wanted to know if those clouds were coming our way. The weather forecast for where we live in Rexburg is sometimes inaccurate because we don't live in Rexburg. So I was trying to be an amateur meteorologist, and the weather app said it was coming from the south-southwest, and I didn't know if that meant it was coming or going from the southwest. And so I did a Google search on the desktop computer that my parents kept in the living room. That would have been typical at that time. I was late to getting a smartphone, so using a desktop computer would have been more comfortable for me. And it was common just to jump on the computer. There wasn't any login or anything, so it was just getting on the internet.
Okay.
I
And
mean, again, I see people saying I'm not buying that. I don't find her credible. So we really think that she is willing to get up there and lie with her mom as the victim? I mean, I find that hard to believe too. I find it hard to believe that she's the one that did the Google search, right? But I also find it hard to believe that she would just get up there and with a straight face lie. I mean, that's wow. That's wild to me. That's wild. You guys seem pretty convinced. Then he gets her to explain how the house is set up. Lindsay Blake plays the dash cam footage that, we all heard them say upstairs or something like that. So more on that coming on Cross, but here's how it came out during direct, explaining how the house is set up.
Even if you knew it, you wouldn't need to type it in.
okay. I want to change gears a little bit. We're going to get back to your father and his artistic side in a minute, but I want to change gears about the physical description of the home that you're now living in. Would it be fair to say that it's a brick house?
Yes.
A one story?
Yes.
That there's a garage?
Yes.
Is there an unusual structure that's attached to the back of the garage?
Yes. The previous
Confirms one-story house, but we're going to get a whole description and long story about the upstairs and what it's used for, et cetera, et cetera.
owner constructed a building over the pump house where the well is, the machinery that draws water for the house. And it's unheated. It's built from a different material than the rest of the house. There's not very much electricity that goes to it.
Okay. And did any of your brothers or sister ever use that? And what was the word for that?
Cozy cone.
Cozy what?
Cone.
Cone. C-O-N-E?
Yes.
Okay. Is there
I'll
is
tell you
there a
what I
time?
don't love. There have been some things with Pryor that, I think people have really nitpicked him and hated on him. Some stuff I think he's done well. Some stuff I think he absolutely hasn't. Him acting like he doesn't know what his own witnesses are saying or stuff that he obviously does know, like the cozy cone, to act like he's never heard that before, that just misses me completely. I'm like, you can just miss me with the trying to, build rapport with the jury with, oh, what is that? Cone. Oh, cone, like C-O-N-E. Okay. It's like, yeah, it looks like a cone, dude. Come on. Anybody would know what somebody was talking about if they said that.
And when
Sorry,
at least one of your brothers would use the cozy cone?
We all would periodically, the children. We would play musical instruments up there. It was far enough away from the rest of the house that you could play loudly on drums and it wouldn't annoy mom. And you could turn up your guitar amp as loud as you wanted and nobody could hear it. But I would go up there. My brother Mark would. My sister Leah would go up there to study sometimes because it was quieter.
Now, in terms of access to the cozy cone, is it true you have to go through the garage in order to get into the cozy cone?
Yes.
And how would you do that?
Well, you would open the door to go into the garage, walk through the garage, go through another doorway, and you would be in a hallway. And then to go upstairs, you would have to go through another doorway. It was really inconvenient.
Okay. I want to touch a little bit about your father's.
So then they get into his faith beliefs. And like a lot of other people in this case, and Vicky, she said she didn't know or think her mom was dark, but she does know about light and dark. Her dad's very traditional in what he believed. He was very well researched and focused on the early leaders, which a lot of people do. He was fundamental in his faith, old school, a literalist, meaning, what he read is what he believed and he thought was real and literal, exactly how it was. She defines light and darkness based on your motivations. Tammy was even more traditional than Chad. So this was something else. Sorry, Whitney's texting me. I got to respond real quick. So she said that Tammy agreed with Chad and thought the same way and also had the light and dark and also was a literalist and a fundamentalist and traditional and all that, which I found interesting and I found to be a new detail as well. So, and again, we know somebody on Tammy's computer read the email from Charles Vallow that said Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell were having an affair, did nothing about it. Was she like in on this? The way that she describes Tammy and Chad's relationship is so weird later too. She learned that her dad had an affair, thought it was wrong. Lots of people can give blessings. Tammy had, vague experience with paintball. That was kind of a big part of it. She didn't want an autopsy. Chad was kind of quiet about it. He just kind of agreed with her. He was genuinely grieving. And I did see some people say, she said about seeing her mom die. But again, if we're going to nitpick the words kind of how she said it, but I get people think that's a Freudian slip. She definitely testified that he was exactly as she would expect an LDS man to react, sad and happy because, you're going to be reunited one day. But it was genuine in what he was doing. Chad told her that JJ and Tyler were in a safe place when they talked about it. Let me see what else we got here. They buried all kinds of animals in the back of the house. Okay, and then a big part of it was she had difficulty with law enforcement. She didn't trust law enforcement. She was mad that they exhumed Tammy. They didn't tell her. They didn't tell anybody. The detectives were, trying to intimidate them at the gym, working out close to them, trying to overhear their conversations. They were judging her and, harassing her at church where she couldn't go to a church anymore. And that's kind of how her direct examination ended. Garth had a lot of similarities, but that's going to be an interesting part we're going to dig into more on Garth's direct. And then I want you to hear how Lindsay Blake starts out this cross-examination.
Yes.
Miss Murray, is it okay if I call you Miss Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Pryor started off saying that he told you to tell the truth here today. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And you said you'd met with Mr. Pryor maybe 3 times.
That I recall.
You've been talking with your dad almost daily over the last several years, correct?
Yes.
Lots of conversations with your dad.
Yes.
Do you recall your dad in early June of 2020 telling you not to cooperate with law enforcement?
I don't remember him saying that.
You don't remember a phone call in which he relayed to you probably better if you just don't cooperate?
I don't remember that.
Do you remember then telling the FBI you were not going to meet with them anymore?
I chose not to do that because of counsel from another attorney.
But it was after having that conversation with your dad, correct?
No.
Was it after June 9th of 2020 that you told him that?
Yes.
After June 10th of 2020 that you told him that?
I don't remember.
Do you recall visiting with your dad as well?
Yes.
Do you recall a visit on around November 23rd of last year?
Not specifically.
Do you recall having a visit where you and your dad talked about that 5K race?
Yes.
And do you recall your dad telling you that you might want to say certain things?
No.
You don't recall that?
No.
Do you recall then talking about a race in 2013?
Yes.
You recall your dad saying, once again, maybe say that?
No.
Do you recall your dad talking about the exercise with you at Zumba that Tammy wasn't able to keep up? She would just make up her own moves. Do you recall your dad telling you that?
No.
But you've had a lot of visits with your dad.
Yes.
So it may be hard.
So again, she kind of comes off firing, confirming Pryor said, telling the truth, and then impeaching her. I thought some of it hit harder than others. But overall, I think it was a good enough cross. Fancy said, no testimony today would sway me. It only confirms that Chad was a master manipulator. Brandy said, no shot. Emma thought her dad having an affair, then marrying Lori immediately after was okay. That's what I'm saying. And she said it was wrong. She said she didn't agree with it. But that's even weirder to me that she would come up here and just, if she is lying, with some of this stuff, I mean, if she's telling the truth, it changes the case. If she's not, it's just a bold-faced lie. So it's very interesting. She did talk about how the parents shared passwords. So technically Chad could have gone in and deleted that email from Charles Vallow. It didn't have to be Tammy necessarily. And then I thought Pryor was trying to get something out about where the kids were and what Chad told Emma about where the kids were, and it didn't really come out fully. But I thought Lindsay Blake kind of gave Emma a chance to talk about it more, and then on redirect kind of opened the door for John Pryor to ask about it again. And the clarification I thought was interesting, and again, aids the defense. That's the point. It aids the defense. Is the jury going to believe her? I don't know. But she's giving them the pieces of testimony and evidence that they need to argue later.
December 13th.
And you talked about a meeting that you had with Detective Hope. Is it that same meeting?
Yes.
And do you recall at that meeting, Detective Hope inquiring of you or letting you know that they were still concerned with the whereabouts of JJ Vallow?
Yes.
Do you recall him telling you that they were still looking for him?
Yes.
You talked about seeing Detective Hermosillo at the gym sometime. Do you recall approximately when that was?
It was after my dad had been arrested. So sometime after 2020 or during that year.
And when you met with Detective Hope, do you recall him telling you that all he wanted to see was JJ was safe and find out where he was located?
Yes.
Do you recall indicating that you were in contact with your dad at that time?
Yes.
Did you ever ask your dad where JJ Vallow was?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
He told me that he was in a safe place.
Did you ever ask your dad where Tylee Ryan was?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
In a safe place.
Do you know where JJ and Tylee were found?
Yes.
Where?
In the backyard
Of whose property?
of my dad's property.
I thought she was just going to stop cross there. I'll play it one more time for you because that to me was the time where it was like, yeah, this is over. This is over.
Dated?
Yes.
Do you recall indicating that you were in contact with your dad at that time?
Yes.
Did you ever ask your dad where JJ Vallow was?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
He told me that he was in a safe place.
Did you ever ask your dad where Tylee Ryan was?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
In a safe place.
Do you know where JJ and Tylee were found?
Yes.
Where?
In the backyard
Of whose property?
of my dad's property.
Like to me, that's, I mean, you just kind of call it right there. You just kind of call it right there. John, the people they wanted one the other day when I was here by myself and I didn't know how to do it, but they want a poll on, do we find Emma's testimony credible? Yes or no? And yes, hit the like button if you guys have not already. There's almost 5,000 of us in here. Let's see if we can get to 5,000 likes. They talk a little bit about, castings, light and dark. She wasn't there for all of her dad's conversations. She didn't jump in and talk about her mom's health when other people were asking or talking about it. Tries to make a big deal about her not trusting cops. And again, if she thinks her dad's innocent and thinks he's really framed, it is what it kind of is. And I guess some of this would track, but she reads the text about how Chad said, I'm sad, but not for the reason everyone thinks. And then she plays that squad car video. And I wanted to just play a little portion of it.
Do you recall this conversation with your dad?
Yes.
And when you first walked up, your dad didn't ask you if you knew why he was arrested, did he?
No.
Do you recall a conversation in there about moving a mattress from upstairs and putting the books on the shelves or something along those?
Yes.
Where was the upstairs?
It was in the top of the cozy cone.
So there was a mattress in
So there was an upstairs that somebody could walk down to, and there was a mattress there.
He had just barely put it there.
I mean, she's really trying to qualify everything to make it sound good for her dad, even when the clear answer is not great.
Typically, no one lived up there. It's like the one time of year that the temperature actually cooperated. There just wasn't room at the house. There's a lot of people living there at the time.
So there was an upstairs that had room for a mattress though?
Yeah.
And there was some talk in there about some
All right. And then we're going to jump and listen to a little bit of redirect, which was pretty short on its own. But again, I think that Pryor did the right thing on redirect because Blake kind of opened the door. It didn't come out great on direct where he was trying to get her to tell everybody what Chad said about where the kids were and why he thought they were in a safe place.
Okay. Now, the prosecuting attorney, Ms. Blake, talked to you about whether your dad discussed with you where the children were, correct?
Yes.
Was there ever a discussion with your dad that Lori Vallow was concealing the location of the children from everyone?
Yes.
And as part of that, your dad never knew where the children were. Is that correct?
Yes.
What he did know is that Ms. Vallow had indicated to him that the children were safe.
Yes.
objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay and speculation.
Well, it's untimely. Overruled.
Untimely, meaning it sounds like you might have sustained that, but he got in. That's a very valuable piece of evidence if people believe Emma. Okay. I'm going to qualify all of that. Okay. But if they believe Emma, which John just sent me the initial poll results, which is they don't believe Emma. 95% say no, 5% say yes. But if they believe Emma and Chad was duped this whole time, Tammy died of natural causes and Chad was duped this whole time, didn't know what Lori and Alex were planning, that's their defense. Emma gave them their whole defense. There is record evidence of their defense that John Pryor gets to argue. That's important. That's important. And all it takes is one juror. We got 95% people who don't believe her, but one juror believes her. It could affect the case. I'm not saying they will. I just think it's really interesting that she was willing to testify exactly how they needed her to.
So is it your understanding that your dad never knew where the children were, but only that they were safe?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for hearsay and speculation.
Sustained.
Okay, before we get to Garth, I want to answer a few questions here. Jessica, why can't the state outright ask them questions like, were you shocked to hear the children were found on the property? So that's kind of a, were you shocked to hear is not really an appropriate question. Were you surprised? You might be able to ask you, were you shocked? The judge might find that language a little hyperbolic. You got to be careful depending on who the judge is. Boyce doesn't seem to like a lot of, charisma and colorful language like that, but they can ask that. I think she thought it was better to say, I like the way she set it up. They were in a safe place, right? Where was that safe place? Your dad's backyard. Thank you. Nothing further. I thought she set it up well, but they could formulate their questions like that, Jessica, if they wanted to. Jody Girl, can they impeach her Google search testimony by determining her whereabouts at the time and day of the search? Was it a work day? Sure, they could, if they could prove she wasn't there. I don't know that they knew she was going to testify to that, so I'm not sure. Teddy, could they have brought in her jail calls with Chad as impeachment? Yes. Or do they have to wait for rebuttal to get them in through a police officer? So they could impeach her with those statements. Yes. It's a recorded statement. Even if they had to get somebody to authenticate them, they could use it and say, is this you? Is this you talking to your dad? Is this an accurate representation of you talking to your dad? Things like that. I don't know if the judge didn't let him in for some other reason, but my guess is if they were really good and would have impeached, maybe they would have brought him in. Or if you're Lindsay Blake and the prosecution team, maybe you don't want her up on the stand for 2 days going through all of this. You get her up, you ask her some questions, you take some hits, and then you sit down. It's all a strategy question. Dana, Peter, I was surprised the prosecution was able to interject questions while Pryor was asking questions. How come? I did buy Emma. She loves her dad and is brainwashed. So the reason they do that sometimes is if you don't feel like they have the foundation or you think this is based off hearsay, some judges will allow you to voir dire usually we do it with experts. If we want to attack an expert's expertise, we say, let's voir dire, let's ask questions. Let me show you why they're not an expert judge and strike them. Sometimes you can do that with a witness on the stand with certain judges to say, she doesn't have knowledge about this, judge. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about why. You weren't working at the school at that time, right? And you didn't go visit your mom on that day, right? So she couldn't have been an eyewitness to that, judge. All this has to be based on hearsay. Or, you didn't study meteorology. You didn't do this. So you didn't know which way the wind was blowing. I don't know. I'm just making up something to say, if you're going to object, sometimes the judge will let you ask questions to prove your objection is correct. All right. Next, let's jump to Garth Daybell. When he was on the stand, I was like, this is really sad. Really sad. He almost looks and sounds like Chad Daybell. Confirms a lot of what his sister said. Chad driving the Durango, things like that. Concerns with mom's health. Doesn't like doctors. Then John Pryor just couldn't help himself again, interjecting something that was just cringy. So we're going to listen to this exchange here. Now, again, more proof to kind of go with the theory that she did eat McDonald's before she died, meaning Tammy, because Garth went and bought it for her and brought it to her, but John Pryor just with a major cringe moment.
Okay. And at that point, did you have an occasion before going in to do that to come home
Come home from,
your first job?
yes.
And walk me through that as to what, after you got home from work from the first job, what did you do next?
So I came home and mom usually came home before me, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
And she told me, I just don't feel good today. I don't want to cook tonight. Can you go get some McDonald's for us?
Now that's a long way to a McDonald's, is it not?
Well, I mean, we're used to driving into town for various things. So
So then what town did you drive to for the McDonald's?
Rexburg.
Okay. And forgive me, I don't recall it. There is a McDonald's in Rexburg?
There's two.
Oh, okay. Then did you get some food for you folks?
I did.
Who did you get food for?
So I bought food for me and my father and my mother.
Okay, do you recall what you got for your mother?
Her favorite meal was the quarter pounder with cheese.
A healthy.
So I was just thinking about this before Pryor makes his comment. I mean, if my mom had a favorite meal at McDonald's, which she doesn't, she does not like McDonald's, but if she did, and I was testifying in her murder trial, I think I'd be pretty sad, be like remembering her favorite meal was always the quarter pounder or whatever, that would be kind of sad, and then how does Pryor respond?
And my mother.
Okay, do you recall what you got for your mother?
Her favorite meal was the quarter pounder with cheese.
A healthy meal.
Like what? A healthy meal. Literally like sarcastically saying she wasn't healthy. So weird. So weird.
Depends.
And anything
You
else?
don't know how to answer.
I don't remember if she wanted anything else with it. Fries.
Okay.
Yeah, I feel like I got her a combo.
And then you went to work at the Haunted Mill. Is that what that's called?
Yep. So so about 7-ish, I left, and she was sitting on the couch and said, "Have a fun time. We'll see you tomorrow. I'll let you sleep in."
Okay. And then at some point you got home at about what time?
So I got home about 1 a.m. shortly after that.
Okay. And then at that point, again, you previously testified the distance between your bedroom and your mother and father's bedroom. Is that right?
Yes,
And the distance there was about how far?
about 20 feet.
Okay. And then at some point, did you hear anything coming from your mother and father's bedroom?
As I passed their bedroom, I heard my father snoring.
And is it clear that it was your father snoring?
Yes.
You had no other indication that your mother was snoring.
So again, like if you believe him, dad's asleep snoring, mom's in bed with him. And later he confirms, like, I didn't hear any fighting or wrestling going on in there.
Or making any noise.
I didn't hear anything of that sort.
You didn't see any images in the bedroom of any kind of a struggle or a fight or any kind of an altercation, did you?
No, as far as I knew, it was a normal night.
Okay. And then at some point, what did you do after you went into your bedroom?
I got on my computer and I watched YouTube for a few hours,
And when you say a few hours, what does that mean?
till about 3 a.m. So
Okay.
2 hours-ish.
Okay. And then at early in the morning, at some point, you were awoken. Is that right?
Yes.
And how were you awoken?
I heard my dad saying, Garth, get up. I need help.
Okay.
And I got out of bed and ran over to help.
And then when you walked into your parents' bedroom, what exactly did you observe?
I observed my mother had rolled partially out of bed with her legs entangled in the sheets. And my instinct was, oh, she needs help. So I immediately grabbed her by the shoulders and lifted her up back into the bed.
Okay. And at that point, you felt her arms were cold?
Yeah, I felt she was cold and stiff and
Okay.
she was gray, and I realized she's not been breathing.
Okay. Okay. And at some point between the time you got home at 1 o'clock and the time you went to sleep at about 3 o'clock, did you hear anything or any indication that there was any kind of sound or struggle?
I heard nothing.
And would you agree that it's close enough that if there was some kind of a struggle or a fight or anything that you would have heard it?
I would have definitely heard it.
I mean, that's pretty good evidence for the defense, right? I mean, these kids are literally building Daybell's defense, which I found I didn't know what to really expect. You know, after everything I've heard, it's tough to believe Chad Daybell, but I mean, I get it. It's his kids. Okay. So then an interesting part comes where, you know, he doesn't like the cops and they force him to come down to the station and they've got him there for 5 to 6 hours. And then we talk about some grand jury testimony. I found this part pretty interesting. We're going to listen to it together. Gingy Prob said, hey, Laura, you know, fam, so I found the indictment error last month and tried to contact the channel. I didn't notify the state because in my opinion, if you go for capital punishment, you should at least get the indictment right. So Gingy Probs, I vaguely remember reading something about this. But I will say, I have to make a call doing this, okay? Doing this YouTube stuff. I really don't want to get, and I'm fine with you sending me something like this 100%. The people that watch this channel, you send me whatever. Hopefully I'm able to get to it. I know obviously I'm not able to get to everything and I hate that because of my OCD and I have zero open, you know, text messages and emails and all that. But I really don't want to get involved in the case. And I'm not saying you were asking me to, but I wouldn't want to reach out to the prosecution and tell them to do something or reach out to the defense and tell them to do something. I don't feel like that's my place in whatever this world is and whatever we're doing here, watching trials, talking about it, seeing what prospective jurors would say, educating the general public about the justice system. You know, I really think that it's a fine line to walk. You know, it's a fine line to walk. Now, if I thought that something really horrible was happening and it was a major injustice, maybe that would be different. But a mistake a lawyer's making, I don't think I would want to reach out and say, hey, do this. It's something I've been thinking about. You know, I haven't really, I don't know. But that's really interesting that you did try to send it to us earlier and that you did pick it out. It's crazy that they didn't see it. It's crazy. Sandy D, do we know if McDonald's was found in her stomach by the Emmy? I can't recall if that was her last meal. I think they said there was some like remnants of it. Addie, this is giving me the sweats here to see this. All right, so let's listen to this. So I will say before everybody gives me too many props, I do not check the Lawyer You Know email every day. Usually that is a team effort, but I do check my work emails and text messages and things like that. Yes, I keep them at 0. Okay, so let's listen to this exchange and we start talking about the grand jury stuff.
Detained my wife and brought her in a separate car.
Were you two kept together in the same room?
We were kept in separate rooms the entire time.
And when you say the entire time, how long did they keep you in the separate rooms?
About 5 or 6 hours.
Okay. At any point, did they try to talk to you?
They did.
Okay. And what was the nature of the discussion?
They were telling me that my story was untrue and that I needed to change it.
Objection, Your Honor. Move to strike. Calls for hearsay.
Overruled.
When you say they told you they needed you to change your story or that they didn't believe you, who was they?
The 3 detectives that I've mentioned.
Were there any other detectives there?
There was a Detective Mattingly who was with my wife.
Okay. And at some point, is it your understanding they were doing the same thing to your wife?
She tells me they never talked to her.
Objection, Your Honor. Calls for hearsay.
Sustained.
And at some point, did you ask to have an attorney represent you?
I did.
And at some point and you said it was between 5 and 6 hours?
Yes,
And at some point, were you released?
I was.
Were you subsequently charged with anything as a result of being detained?
I was not.
Did they take any further action with you as a result of being detained?
They did not.
Okay. And then
It definitely seems like these kids, I'll just tell you, like, regardless of if you think they're lying for their dad, it does seem like a little bit much what law enforcement did to them, like trying to force them to change their stories, detaining them for 5 to 6 hours. Like, if they're going to be bad witnesses for you, they're going to be bad witnesses. They're Chad Daybell's kids. Look at how all of you guys are looking at him. You're not finding him that credible. I do think that it doesn't look great from the prosecution and law enforcement side, this little exchange we're going to get into here. Now, lucky for the prosecution, John Pryor decides to call this guy's lawyer for whatever reason. I was shocked to hear he waived attorney-client privilege so his lawyer could come testify here. Potatoes and peanuts, right? I feel like John Pryor's trying to argue that those like potatoes could be McDonald's French fries. I don't know. I knew they found some food, but again, there was conversations of her throwing up. So it's kind of a convoluted part. They didn't find any Whoppers. Thank you, Carter, for gifting some memberships.
subsequent to that, was there another occasion when you were accused of or asked to change your story?
I was summoned to 2 separate grand juries.
Okay, I want to talk about the second grand jury. Do you recall that?
I do.
And do you have an understanding of why you were summoned in front of the grand jury?
It was made pretty plain that I needed to change my story to fit theirs.
Okay, and in the event you didn't change your story, you would be indicted by the grand jury?
Yes, and they had a list of charges that they were threatening me with.
Okay, when you say they were threatening with you, who are you talking about?
I didn't talk to them specifically.
Okay.
Myself. I had asked for an attorney who was going in between us.
And who was that attorney?
His name was Forrest Fisher.
And at this point, you are willing to waive your attorney-client privilege and allow Mr. Fisher to discuss the case?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, when I heard that, that was wild. And I was like, oh boy, are they going to call him? Oh, they call him, but it doesn't go as John Pryor expects it to. So just wait, because that's coming. I get it. I want people to, why are you assuming it's true what he said about law enforcement? I think he lied about what the police asked him to do. I don't know. Based on Cross, I kind of felt like it was kind of true. And especially the second grand jury indictment, how they were trying to indict him for perjury. She was trying to put the blame on the grand jury for bringing the second one, but I found it interesting. And I feel it's like this guy's mom was taken from him too. He believes his dad. I believe. So this comment said, I think the kids believe what they're saying. I kind of do too. But it doesn't mean it's the truth. Chad and Tammy brainwashed these kids for a year. It's just sad all around. I agree. What would your defense of Chad be? I think Pryor doing the best he can. I think so too. I think this is the defense. This is the best defense. Tammy died of natural causes. We have evidence of that from the coroner. Lori Vallow is manipulative. We have evidence throughout the trial about that. Now, it's not going to win the day, in my opinion. I think the state did prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. And I haven't seen anything that's created any reasonable doubt so far after one day of the defense's case. We're going to stay open until the defense finishes. But I think this is the best ditch effort you have. That's what I think as far as this goes. But I do feel bad. Like his mom just died and they're threatening with all these criminal charges. And, you know, I get it. We don't want people to commit perjury and lie and stuff like that. But it's sad all around, like Jason said.
And your understanding of going in front of the grand jury is that you were going to be indicted unless you changed your story.
Yes.
And do you know what prosecutorial agency was attempting to do this to you?
I believe it was Fremont and Madison counties.
Okay. And at that point, did you testify in front of that second grand jury?
I did.
Okay. Now, before you testified in that second grand jury, you had previously testified in a grand jury that was related to your father. Is that correct?
Yes.
And at that point, you told us what you believed was your version of the facts of this case, correct?
Correct.
And at the second grand jury, they brought you in, and the focus of the second grand jury, did you understand that to be you being charged with a grand jury offense?
I understand that it was that way. I felt very, I was feeling extremely pressured.
Pressured by who?
The prosecutors.
And at some point you testified in front of the grand jury. Is that correct?
Correct.
Did you tell relatively the same story to both grand juries?
I told the identical story.
At any time, were you ever indicted by the second grand jury brought by the prosecuting attorneys against you?
I was not.
So that was like a moment of vindication. It's like, oh, you second grand jury, they accused you of all this stuff, but the grand jury didn't indict you. How much of this is the jury understanding? I don't know. How much of it did you guys understand? Because grand juries can be investigative. They can be used for charging. He was testifying in Chad's first. Then they wanted to bring him back because they thought maybe he committed perjury. Then they decided not to indict him for perjury. Doesn't mean he's innocent and never did anything wrong. It's just kind of convoluted. And I kind of feel like I'm not so sure this should have come in front of the jury. If I was the judge, I may have found that to be irrelevant and not allowed it to come in. I don't think Lindsey Blake objected, though. Maybe they thought about it before, before the trial started. But I thought it was pretty interesting myself. Let me see if there's anything else.
But you felt that at that point, the purpose of the second grand jury was to try to threaten or persuade you to change your story. Is that correct?
Yes.
I mean, that's such a leading question, but she's just letting him get away with it. Let's listen to a little bit of Cross next. I think if there was. So you believe Emma when she says she Googled the wind directions too? Gosh, I don't know. That's the hard one for me. That one you can't mistake, right? I guess what I mean is I believe that they believe their mom died of natural causes. And I believe they believe it was all Lori Vallow and not their dad, Chad Daybell. That's I feel like what I'm getting from the kids. And were they willing to lie to try to make that happen? I don't know. Gingy, so sorry. I didn't mean to accuse. It's a weird line. I didn't know what responsibility I had, if any, when I saw it. Very interesting to think about. I love that you sent it to me. Don't apologize at all for sending me stuff on cases that we're talking about. I get that's what this is. That's what this community is. I am going to get to as much as I can. And I'm going to engage when I feel like it's appropriate. So don't ever apologize. Don't ever apologize. I like when people do it, especially if people aren't like, oh, I can't believe you didn't respond to, my 50 emails and get so mad. I'm like, doing the best I can. That doesn't help. That doesn't make me want to respond more. It makes me want to respond less. And you did not do that at all, Gingy. So I appreciate it. It was very respectful. And I have no problem with what you did. I was just trying to tell you kind of how I look at this. All right, let's jump ahead and listen to some of Cross here.
Do you recall talking to an individual named Micaiah Bagelin and telling him you found your mom dead in her bed and your dad gone?
I don't recall talking to him about that.
Do you recall talking to Cara Briggs, who's now Cara Daybell, and Emma Moss about finding your mom on the couch?
I told Kara. She's now my wife.
And there was talk of some testimony at some grand juries. Do you recall that? Sorry, let me back up. Let me rephrase that. Do you recall counsel asking you about having testified at a couple proceedings?
Sorry,
I felt bad for him here because he said yes to that question, but he wanted to say no. I kind of noticed it in real time. And then he does this. I feel bad for this guy. And I know, maybe I'm going soft or something, but I feel bad for these kids, man. They lost their mom and their dad is so screwed up. I feel bad. And they've got wives and some of them have kids. And it's like, oof.
I don't quite know the rules, but when you were talking to me about Kara and Emma, can you repeat that question? I don't know if
Yes. Do you recall telling Cara and or Emma about finding your mom on the couch?
I did not tell them that she was on the couch.
Do you recall having talked to one or both of them?
I do. I had told them that the night before I had seen her on the couch as she said goodbye to me.
And if they were to say something different, would that surprise you?
I've heard that before.
And then do you recall counsel talking to you about you having testified at a couple grand jury proceedings?
Yes.
And are you aware that the second grand jury was held based on the request of the first grand jury?
Judge, I'm going to object. That calls for speculation.
I'm asking if
Argumentative,
he's aware.
Judge.
Well, the question
There's no
is,
foundation.
yes, just the question is whether he's aware. You can.
And Pryor brought up all this stuff. That's the problem. It's like, yeah, I don't know if this guy understands what a grand jury proceeding is. I'm not sure if he understands what the purpose is and what they can do and can't do. I thought it was a weird line of questioning for a lay witness, period. And then now it's getting confusing. But Blake, the door is open for her to ask the questions she wants.
Are you aware that the second grand jury was conducted based on the request of the first grand jury?
I was not aware of that.
And counsel asked you about Joseph Smith in a casting. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And what did you indicate happened to the person that they were casting on?
He continued to live on and lived his life.
So he didn't die. And that was another big thing that they got out of these witnesses, is that just because you do a casting, just because somebody's light and dark and you cast it out, doesn't mean they're going to die.
Are you aware of your mom having been designated as being possessed?
I had not heard that before.
Had you ever heard of JJ Vallow being designated as being possessed?
I had not heard that.
What about Tylee Ryan?
I had not heard that.
Is your mom still alive?
She is not.
Do you know where the remains of Tylee Ryan and JJ Vallow were located?
They were found in the backyard.
And when you say the backyard, whose backyard?
My father's.
I have no further questions.
All right.
Mama Wolf, this is a great point. I love, this is why I love your guys' comments. And when I say it adds so much, I'm not blowing smoke. Do you think Pryor restricted them from watching the trial so they would not see the evidence? I also feel bad for them, but do not understand how they do not see what happened. So I would never do this for this reason. I would never try to trick witnesses or keep them from knowing what the evidence is, or, try to keep them, if they're in a brainwashed state, in there. I'm not saying that's what he did, but my mind doesn't go there. When I noticed that he kept making sure the jury knew that you guys hadn't been listening to the evidence, make sure they're under the rule of sequestration, tell them not to talk to anybody on a break. He did this like in front of the jury, very obviously, all day today. And I was like, gosh, he really wants the jury to know that he's not coaching these witnesses and these witnesses aren't getting their story straight. I'm thinking about it purely how lawyers usually think of the rule of sequestration. But you're thinking about it as, how in the world could they believe what they're saying is true? The only way they could believe it is if they're not hearing the evidence. That's a great point, Mama Wolf.
Mr. Pryor.
Redirect.
Garth, regardless of what the first grand jury may or may not have believed, did you understand that the second grand jury was convened to determine whether or not you were being untruthful in any way and whether you should face perjury charges?
And that's the way I understood it.
Okay. And again, who brought that grand jury against you?
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
Sustained.
Okay. And your recollection and your belief is that you were not indicted by the grand jury, correct?
That is correct.
And did you feel like that someone was trying to intimidate or threaten you to change your testimony?
I do, yes.
And who would that be?
Madison and Fremont County.
I mean, that's not great for the prosecution. You don't want to have that if you don't need it. That he feels like he was pressured and threatened with law enforcement and grand jury proceedings. I mean, that's wild. That's real pressure. And if this case, if anybody believed this guy was innocent, people would be in uproar about that. And I don't feel great about how they handled the Daybell children. Even if, let's say, the prosecutors do believe that they're lying, which they probably do. I don't love that personally. I don't love that. All right. And then now we're going to get to hear from Mr. Fisher. What is it? 549. All right. So this is Mr. Fisher right here in the black suit. This is Garth's defense attorney. And as Julie said, Mr. Fisher can't remember why he was retained. This is a great opening question so you can understand exactly how this testimony is going to go, that John Pryor chose to call this man as a witness, had Garth waive his attorney-client privilege so this guy could talk about what they talked about, what he represented him for. Let's get the juice. Let's get the tea. We're going to find out all the bad stuff the law enforcement and prosecutors did to poor Garth Daybell, right? That's why we're calling him, because I kind of feel a little bit of that after Garth Daybell's testimony. But it's about to be lessened quite a bit.
You solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help me God.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I, Judge?
You may. You can.
Would you state your name, spell your last name for the record?
Thank you. Yes, William Forrest Fisher. Fisher is Fischer.
Mr. Fisher, how are you employed?
I am an attorney with Moulton Office in Driggs, Idaho.
Okay, and you're licensed to practice law in the state of Idaho?
I am.
Did you have an occasion in December of 2021 in regards to a client by the name of Garth Daybell?
I did.
What was the nature of that representation?
As part of my employment, my office contracts out with Fremont County to do contract public defense work. And so under that contract, I was asked to come down to St. Anthony to the Fremont County Courthouse to represent Mr. Daybell, who at that time was under a grand jury testimony situation.
Was it a
They do public defender work. Okay. And that's maybe one of the reasons, I guess, that could be more of an excuse why he doesn't seem to remember much about this case at all, which I'm trying to figure out why John Pryor strategically decided to call him to testify.
grand jury indictment against Mr. Daybell? Or proceeding?
It was a proceeding.
Okay, and the distinction is that a grand jury is summoned and they hear testimony. Is that right?
I believe so. This was actually my first encounter with a grand jury.
Oh, okay. Lucky you.
Yes.
And at that point, were you aware of what charges were being attempted to be brought against Mr. Daybell?
I was not, nor that I can't really recall it this time.
He was not aware of the charges that were even potentially being brought against his client, and he's not aware at this time. You would think you would review the file if you knew you were coming to testify in this case.
Okay.
Or you would think Pryor would ask him to review his file before he came and testified.
But you do recall that it was Mr. Daybell was the focus of the grand jury?
Mr. Garth Daybell, yeah, that is correct. That's
Okay.
correct.
And you don't have any recollection of what the underlying facts were about why he was brought in front of the grand jury?
Not specifically. It was a long time ago. I can't really recall. I do recall at that time he had actually previously testified in front of the grand jury. And when I was brought in, the grand jury had some follow-up questions, and that's what I was called in to assist him with during that time.
So you don't remember if this was a second grand jury that was convened?
I believe it was the second time they called him in. I'm not sure if that was a completely separate grand jury. I believe it was the same grand jury, but I can't really recall.
You're not sure about that?
That's correct.
Okay. Is it possible that it was a
It's
second
like when Pryor doesn't agree with you, he's like, you're not sure about that, right?
grand jury convening against Mr. Daybell for perjury?
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Do you have any recollection of the advice that you gave Mr. Daybell at that point?
Some. At that time, I had come in and Mr. Garth Daybell had some questions. He was concerned, given the fact that they had asked him some questions and he had previously testified. And so I consulted him as a defense attorney to answer only the question that was being asked, and that if he wasn't quite sure, that he could take the time to confer with me. I was not in the grand jury. I wasn't observing it. I was sitting outside of the courtroom. And I told him that if he ever needed to take a break, he could come talk to me. We could talk about the situation and go from there. Beyond that, I told him not to talk to the press anymore.
Okay. And at this point, you don't have any distinct recollection as to why you were there or what you were doing. Is that right?
I was there to advise him on giving testimony in his follow-up grand jury questioning. And my role as a defense attorney, and I believe in talking to Mr. Daybell at that time, was to ensure that he did not get himself into any trouble by possibly
Perjury.
committing perjury or not remembering something quite correctly. I was there to assist him and to ensure that he, if he had questions, that he could come and talk to me and that we could go through it on a step-by-step basis.
Do you recall ever telling Mr. Daybell that this was a trap designed to catch him?
I don't recall ever saying that, though that would possibly be something that I might have said. I don't recall specifically.
Okay.
As a defense
That would possibly be something I might have said. That's about the best evidence Pryor got out of this witness.
attorney, that's always something that we're concerned about, is that if they previously testified on something, that if they're called to testify on the same thing again, that there is the potential as a defense attorney to potentially cross yourself. And so to watch out for that.
And your understanding is the focus of the grand jury wasn't about Chad Daybell. It was solely about Garth Daybell and his previous testimony. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And at this point, your understanding is that grand jury did not indict Mr. Daybell for any kind of perjury charge. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Judge, I have nothing else.
I mean, I don't get it. A trucker's tale said, if this is the caliber of witness, Pryor was better off calling his experts and resting. They made Tammy sound like she was into this with the whole light and dark crap too. Yeah, I mean, I think it was worth it to call his kids. And I think a lot of people are like, oh, if his kids would have testified for the prosecution, I think a lot of people would have said, oh, that's big that even his kids don't believe him. Grown kids living this whole life. So I think there could be some people on the jury that think the other way. And Matt Hatter said, Garth is a grown man. I agree. I'm not calling him a child, but grown men love their mother and father too. I mean, I should know. I do. And I would never want to think this of my dad. And I would love my mom and be very sad if something like this happened to her. I'd be crushed and devastated, especially if I found her. I think just because he's a grown man doesn't mean you can't feel bad for him. I hope he's not lying. If he's lying, then he deserves to be indicted for perjury. Syracuse Brad said, fail to prepare. Yeah, if you fail to prepare, you prepare to fail. One of my favorite quotes. Brooklyn said, isn't saying what the investigator said hearsay? Potentially. I don't know exactly what spot you're referencing, but potentially. Nirvana, as a defense attorney, how do you view defending a guilty client to the degree of 3 M's and ability to separate work from conscience? So yes, it's 9:50, so we got to get to that redirect. So most of the time when clients admit that they're guilty and they're willing to admit they're guilty, you're working out a deal. You're trying to get them the best deal that you possibly can. We don't put clients up that are going to lie on the stand and say, I didn't do it if they did do it. And again, criminal defense is not my favorite practice area, right? And I don't do a ton of it. This question needs a longer format to answer, unfortunately, that I don't have today. Maybe on the members only live. Hopefully you can be there, Nirvana. And Future said, members video will be great, Peter. Can't wait to see what John planned and tell Whit. We're excited for her to be back with us. Let the smack talk begin. I don't even know what's going to happen. I know John's going to embarrass me. That's all I know. He's going to make me look like an idiot. That's what I expect to come from the members only video. So if you want to see that, join the membership. I think it's on Wednesday that we're doing that. And stick around here. We're going to redirect you right now to a double Daybell burger from McDonald's, where we're going to listen to the Lori Vallow juror number 4 interview with Nady and then get my reaction from, I think it was this morning or last night. You guys are the best. I appreciate you so much. Hit that like button if you wouldn't mind before you left. And as soon as you get to the new video, it helps a ton. Plan to fail. If you fail to plan to fail. Yeah. Same, right? Sussex, Sandra. But I appreciate you guys. Until next time, I am out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, The Lawyer You Know.